Hi, I'm Laura with Angels Plus.
And I'm Steve. Today we're going to show you a little video on how to make a little fry rearing jar. A lot of people come to us with questions every day on how they can keep their fry alive. They're having trouble. The fry are dying. Either they're being eaten by the parents, or if they try to raise them artificially, they fungus up, or they get a bacterial infection and they die. And so today we're going to show you a little rearing jar that will probably help you raise your fry if you give it a shot. Very, very simple to make. All it consists of is a container, which we trap the fry in the container with a couple of filters on the top and the bottom, which allows us to do a couple things. One is we get to take the water and move it through the jar, and that constant water movement inhibits the formation of fungus and bacteria. It also filters the water, and it allows us to put this jar into a much bigger tank where that vast volume of water buffers the inside water in the container. And that buffering of that water will mean that if there's something going on that they don't like, it's spread out over a 15 or 20 gallon tank instead of a 1 gallon jar. And the particular components to this are just simply a jar, a lift tube, an air line to run it, and a couple pieces of sponge. And Laura will put this together for you and show you how easy it is to put together.
It's real simple. You just want to insert the larger of the two sponges into the jar, and you don't want it touching the bottom of the jar. You want it down to within about 1/2 an inch, just so that there's a gap. And you want to make sure that when you put it down in there, you don't want any creases or spots on the side where fry could get trapped against the glass and the sponge. Then you want to take your lift tube. It's a 1/2 inch piece of CPVC with the air line inserted to within 1 inch of the bottom. You're going to take that and put it in the smaller of the two pieces of sponge and put it through the hole in the larger sponge.
You just kind of twist it in there as you're going, and it'll get right down into that sponge.
And once it goes through and you hit the bottom of the jar, you just want to pull back a little bit so that there's a gap, and you'll be able to see the gap. And then the top piece of sponge, it can stick out a little bit. You might want to just tuck it in a little bit so it's not sticking out too far, but you don't want it completely in the jar.
And once this is set up, what you're going to do is you're going to put this in a 15 or 20 gallon tank, submerge it totally. The lift tube should be underneath the surface of the water so that there's room for the water to bubble up and go somewhere. And then you're going to add your fry to the container. It's best if you get this filter established by having either an established filter in the tank that helps spread to this filter, or you can put this in a tank and let it run for a few days before you put your fry in it, and that will help establish the sponge filter also. And then what you do is you take a small knife and you cut a slot in the top of this thing, and it's just a slice that will seal itself under pressure, but it gives you a place to put things in. Like when you're adding your fry, you can take a turkey baster and simply slide it through that slit, or if you want to, you can move the foam over and slide it down the edge. That allows you to insert your wigglers. Now what you do is you hatch them like you normally would. You really can't hatch them in this jar very easily. There isn't room for them for a typical slate. But once they hatch, and they're off the slate or whatever hatching medium you're using, get them into the jar right away. They'll sit on the surface of the sponge in a ball, and with that constant airflow, it'll help keep them alive. Once they go for their 5 days of wiggling, they'll start to free swim. And if you want to, at that point, you can actually leave them in the jar and you can feed them for a few days, which is very helpful because it confines the fry into a small space where they can easily find the food. What I would do is I would turn the air off when I feed, take my brine shrimp. It doesn't take much, but you don't want the air moving because the brine shrimp would be sucked into the filter. Just take your baster, put it in your slice or put it down the edge, put a few drops of your brine shrimp in there, and watch them, observe them, make sure they're eating it all, they're getting to it quickly. And once they're done eating and their shrimp is gone, you can start, a few minutes later, start the air back up on it, because you definitely want the air going on it at all times, except for the few minutes that they're feeding. Other than that, what we'll show you a little bit later on in the video now is this in actual use. We'll set this up in a tank for you, and we'll actually add fry to it, and we'll show you the fry at different stages and show you how well this works. What we'll do as far as encouraging you to do this, all you have to do is go out somewhere to like a restaurant or a bar or something like that, find a glass, wide mouth, 1 gallon jar, pickle jar, mayonnaise jar, that kind of thing, something with food, clean it good, and that's your container. These nice round slugs of foam here, though, are very difficult for the average person to cut. If they're not cut round, they won't work because they'll make cracks on the edge and the fry will get stuck and they'll die. In fact, you can lose a whole spawn easily. So these nice little round plugs with the hole in the center and this 1/2-inch piece of PVC we'll actually offer to our customers at a very reasonable price. And you just buy these 3 components, add your own jar and your own airline, and you're all set to go. And this can work for spawn after spawn after spawn. You can be very successful with these once you get the hang of it. They're very easy to use. So anyway, we will show you this in actual use.
Here you can see the jar set up in one of our 30-gallon tanks. The jar is a really great way to raise some really vigorous fry. Here you can see the recently hatched wigglers resting on the bottom sponge of the jar. They'll stay like this for a few days until they're ready to free swim. And all the while they're getting a constant flow of fresh water through the jar. This is the same spawn, now free swimming. Because they're completely enclosed in the jar, they're safe from the other fish in the tank. If you have an empty tank on hand, you can place the jar inside the empty tank, and once the fry have been swimming for a few days and are eating really well, you can just release them into the tank. And you always want to remember before you feed to turn off the airline. Otherwise the shrimp is just going to get sucked right into the sponge immediately and the fry aren't really going to have a chance to eat. So here we've just added shrimp to the jar and the fry are eating vigorously, the airline is off, and you can see that their bellies are really full and they're doing really well in this jar. They're swimming well, they look great. Because the water is constantly filtered, you can actually leave the fry in the jar for about a week or so if you need to, if you don't have the tank space to move them, and they're still going to do really well. We encourage you to give the jar a try. It's a really simple thing to do, and you'll see some better fry because of it. Good luck with your next spawn, and thanks for watching our video.